with the 132nd pick in the 2017 NFL Draft. The Philadelphia Eagles select running back Donnell Humphrey, San Diego State University. What's up, Eagles Nation? What's up, NFL World? How y'all doing, division rivals that are tuning in to spy on us? This is Steve Hyder. This is Gate City Sports Channel, and this is the sports channel where the cerebral NFL fan comes for about 10 minutes of daily content. All right, if you haven't guessed, today's topic, I'd like to talk about the NFL Draft. And in particular, I'd like to talk about Doug Peterson and during his tenure, the NFL Draft during his tenure. Now, one thing I will kind of sidebar this with is to understand a lot of this has to do with Joe Douglas and the personnel staff, but everything kind of works in unison, right? Howie Roseman, Joe Douglas, the NFL personnel staff, or that evaluating staff and the coaching staff. It all kind of comes together, right? And to me, this conversation is about the draft, but let's be honest, this conversation is really about the way that we spend draft capital and the way that we've built this roster for the long-term future and how this draft successes and failures are impacting us. All right, y'all, let's get to today's topic.
118 pick in the 2017 NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select Matt Collins, wide receiver, North Carolina.
All right, so if you take a little trip down memory lane, guys, what we run into is a narrative, a story that there was a coup for the regaining of power, which ultimately led to Chip Kelly's dismissal as coach because he couldn't handle the personnel decisions. He wasn't quite as good as that as he thought. And then in 2016, we have the regrabbing of power by Howie Roseman over personnel decisions. We hire our coach, Doug Peterson, who was from the Andy Reid coaching tree, obviously a former backup quarterback here in Philadelphia during the early years of Donovan McNabb. And the story begins. 2016, with this new coach and with Howie Roseman back in power, the Eagles pull off a blockbuster trade to get a franchise quarterback, which was a major, major trade. We all know the story. The Eagles moved up to the number 2 selection in the NFL Draft in 2016 to take Carson Wentz. What we don't know is how big, of a steal this was. Because if you guys remember the storyline, we really had the 13th pick in that draft. And we ended up trading up to the 8th pick in the draft that year. And we ended up getting rid of Byron Maxwell and Kiko Alonso in the 13th pick in exchange for the Dolphins' 8th overall pick. We made some other trades that year with the Tennessee Titans. We cleared some space and some capital with getting rid of DeMarco Murray, sending him out to Tennessee. And I think we ended up recouping, I'm going to say it was like a 4th or 5th round draft pick. I think it was a 4th round pick. And then from the 8th spot, the Eagles went ahead and traded their 8th pick in 2016, their 3rd and 4th picks in 2016, their 3rd and 4th round picks, their 1st overall pick in 2017, and their 2nd round pick in 2018 in order to move up to the number 2 overall spot to select Carson Wentz.
With the 2nd pick in the 2016 NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select Carson Wentz.
This is such a Howie Roseman move, guys. So ballsy. You got to admit, only Howie Roseman can make these ballsy gambles like this and make them pay off. He's fucking great at this stuff. Moves from the 13th pick to the 8th pick. Then from the 8th pick to the 2nd pick. Gives away numerous picks to get there. Gives away players on top of the picks. Guys, we're talking about Kiko Alonso, which we gave away draft capital to go get once upon a time. Byron Maxwell, which was this huge free agent signing for us who just sucked. It didn't work, right? DeMarco Murray later on, we traded all the way to the Tennessee Titans. Like, we gave away so many players and draft capitals to make this move. And you know what? It was 1,000%. You can't even say 100% because it was 10 times above 100%. The right call to make. Ballsy as hell. And sometimes it gets missed because people like, well, it's a franchise quarterback. How's that ballsy? This is the highest selected FCS player ever. the highest selected FCS player ever. And what kills me is to know that Carson Wentz was born in Raleigh, North Carolina. Okay. My second home. I grew up in Newcastle, Delaware. That's where I get all this Eagle stuff from, guys. That's where the fandom is. I grew up with a Walkman. Yes, I'm that fucking old a Walkman. Like, and I'm talking about the Walkmans that didn't even have the tape deck, just the basic radio Walkmans. Listening to the Phillies games, okay? Watching Eagles games. Like, my family relocated in the mid-'90s. We got here just in time for Hurricane Fran here to Raleigh, North Carolina, okay? I was a student at NC State University, and I have visions of what our quarterback tree could have looked like if Carson Wentz had stuck around Raleigh, man. Because, Jesus, NC State was Phillip Rivers to Russell Wilson to Jacoby Brissett to Mike Glennon to Ryan Finley this past year. Like, Jesus Christ, if we could have had Carson Wentz in that tree, it is a ballsy selection, guys, to go up and get an FCS football player like that. That's the way that this tenure kicked off. Analysis and belief and faith that Doug Peterson and his coaching staff could develop this kid, select an FCS football player the highest ever, and Howie Roseman making these moves to go get it. We got to keep this in perspective when we analyze the roster, because the next ballsy move was we didn't hire someone, a director of player personnel basically until May of that year. So we waited until after the draft, bring on Joe Douglas. And that's kind of a part of the story I think that gets forgotten quite often. Now we move into Joe Douglas alongside of Howie Roseman, alongside of, Doug Peterson and the coaching staff, along with our scouting department and the rest of our personnel staff. And that's phase 2, and that leads us into the 2017 draft.
With the 53rd pick in the 2017 NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select Sidney Jones.
All right, guys, really beginning with the 2016 offseason following the draft, with the addition of Joe Douglas. I think the Eagles personnel staff, down from its the vice president, Howie Roseman, down to the executive over player, personnel, which was Joe Douglas, down to the scouting department, down to the coaching staff. Everything really mirrored the way that they wanted this organization to be run. Aggressive, guys. Risk-taking aggressiveness. And it paid off at the end of 2017, guys, with hoisting the Lombardi. With that said, with an aggressive nature, you get burnt sometimes. Now, I will say this. I don't know how much credit to give for 2016 to Joe Douglas because he had nothing to do with the draft. And that draft, me personally, I think that draft was pretty damn successful. Because when you really look at who was gained in that draft, man, we did a damn good job of selecting guys that were going to be here for the long term. Carson Wentz, being the franchise quarterback. Isaac Seumalo, who does have a starting role at left guard. I'm not saying that it's been fantastic at all points, but he started in the Super Bowl for us, and he's a starter currently. In the 5th round, we got Wendell Smallwood. Wendell Smallwood never really lived up to the hype, but I can't say that that was a wasted pick because it was a 5th round pick that turned into a very good core special teams player and a guy that did have a role in this team for a while. He was nothing special, but the value was there on that pick. Halapuli Vaitai. Look, this is a great swing backup role guy for us that plays guard, tackle. He started Super Bowl. Like, hard to knock that pick. Blake Countess, who was brought back this year, and it just, unfortunately with injury, he couldn't continue that role as being a special team ace. I mean, we do have a thing about late rounds, man. We really try to find those role players in that special teams in the 5th, 6th, and 7th rounds. And we're really good at taking chances in those rounds. An example of a chance, Jalen Mills, 7th round, 2016. That's a hell of a risk to take. A very talented football player that was well below his value because of concerns he had that had nothing to do with football. So, risky. We were risky. Let's move into 2017. I think the Eagles have always, underneath Howie Roseman, had a theme here with drafting. When it can be, when you can put things in motion, they like to draft high in the rounds, 1st round picks on the O-line and D-line. And underneath Doug Peterson, the only exception, because we've had 3 1st round picks with him, has been the selection of Carson Wentz. Other than that, 2017, we went with Derek Barnett. 2019, we just went with Andre Dillard at the offensive line. So that theory seems to hold, steady. 2017 comes underneath a lot of controversy, though. because the Eagles were very, very high. They fell in love with Christian McCaffrey, and Carolina beat us to the punch on the 8th overall pick, and they selected him. It would be interesting to have seen if Howie Roseman would have selected a running back in the first round. I think he would have gone. I think he would have drafted McCaffrey. The other player the Eagles fell in love with was Dalvin Cook, and Dalvin Cook was taken ahead to where we couldn't get him. And I really think the Eagles had their heart set on those two players, on McCaffrey and Cook. Cook went 41st, 2 picks ahead of us, just 2 picks ahead of us to the Minnesota Vikings. The guy we're going to square off with. We fell in love with Dalvin Cook. We wanted one of those 2 ball players. And it could be argued that the Eagles, being aggressive, didn't take what was in front of them. Because with the 43rd pick in the NFL draft, who did they take? They thought they had a top 15 talent, and Sidney Jones had slipped down to the 2nd round. It doesn't look that way, guys. I don't know if this injuries had, that he suffered during his pro day has just lingered and has just ruined this man's career, but he has not panned out to be what we thought he was. That's just the truth. That was an aggressive move and a move that did not pay off. I think when you put it in a vacuum, this is why people get pissed off. Because with the 48th pick, Joe Mixon was taken in Cincinnati. With the 67th pick, Alvin Kamara was taken with New Orleans. Kareem Hunt was taken with the 86th pick. And that one really sucks because that was an NCAA player, which, when my wife ended up going to school down here at UNCG and I started going to school here at UNCG as well, we bought a house out here in Greensboro. So I was pretty familiar with Kareem Hunt. He was a pretty good ball player out here. James Conner went 105th overall. Tariq Cohen went 119th overall. Marlon Mack went 143rd overall. Aaron Jones went 182nd overall. There were a lot of running backs on the board from 2017 that we could have gained. And we didn't make any of those selections. The aggressive nature of going after Sidney Jones, that one didn't pan out. And it can be argued that at times we really fail to capitalize on draft picks. Now, I will say this. You got to put everything into context because we won the Super Bowl that year. That draft was in Philadelphia. I mean, all the momentum in the world. Like, it was a good year. Keep in mind, in 2017, we were fortunate enough to have drafted Rasul Douglas. Okay. We were fortunate enough to have signed Corey Graham, to have signed Chris Maragos, and we brought back Jalen Watkins. Made a move to get Patrick Robinson. So Joe Douglas did his job in terms of free agency that year. He identified these lower tier talents and brought them in, and they played major, major roles. It was a hell of a job on his part. But I think the stain of missing on running backs will always be a part of that draft, and that part does suck. I want to get into the shaping of our roster and how these missed draft picks could be kind of putting us in a slight crunch that we're experiencing right now, especially when it comes to the secondary.
99th pick in the 2017 NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles, and the greatest fans in all the world. We select Rasul Douglas, defensive.
All right, guys. So to end this story, just going to put it like this. Not every plan comes to fruition. And you can see this with the current concerns we have with the secondary and to some extent the defensive line. So to begin with, we just don't invest as much on the defensive side of the ball as we do on the offensive side of the ball, especially when it comes to the draft. With that said, we have tried. There was an obvious plan in place for the secondary. From the moment that Doug Peterson came in here, Howie Roseman and the rest of our personnel staff was in place. Joe Douglas, everybody. Obviously, Joe Douglas is gone now, but 2016, they had Leotis McKelvin, right? Rodney McLeod comes in to join Jalen Mills, the draft pick. So they tried with Leotis McKelvin, which that was the one where I was really shocked it didn't work. I thought that was definitely going to be something that worked for us, and it didn't. The following year, obviously we drafted in the 7th round. We pluck a guy with great value for Jalen Mills. That's a hell of a value to get out of the 7th round. The very next year, we gamble. We take a risk on this kid that we thought was a top 15 talent, who just had an injury, and we just needed to be able to weather the storm for a year. and let him heal. And that didn't pay off. And that was Sidney Jones. But that was, 43rd pick in the draft. I know they said 53rd, but they were actually, that's wrong. It was a 43rd. To then turn around and still in the top 100 in the third round, turn around and take another corner and Rasul Douglas, who has paid dividends recently. He's looking like he's definitely developed. I'm very happy about the future of Rasul Douglas. And then to go into the offseason in 2017, we picked up Ronald Darby, right? Patrick Robinson, Corey Graham, Chris Maragos, Jalen Watkins. Like guys, there was a concerted effort there. 2018, we spent draft capital on Avonte Maddox in the 4th round for the slot role, right? I mean, it just kind of keeps going on, guys. I mean, we definitely have tried to fix the secondary. And you can see the plan was there with a lot of young talent. Ronald Darby. Then you go to players like, Jalen Mills. You go to players like Sidney Jones, Rasul Douglas, Avonte Maddox. Like Crevan LeBlanc coming in last year was a hell of a find by Joe Douglas in the scouting department. Like injuries, though, man. Some things just bite you in the ass. And there's not a lot you can do, and it's injuries. Injuries have, number one, some players it hasn't worked. Like I don't know what's going on with the likes of Ronald Darby, but it has not worked with him. And 2017 had so much promise with Ronald Darby. He's just fallen off 2018 and the beginning of 2019. Might be a lot of hampered injuries, but if it doesn't get turned around, we're in a lot of trouble. And that's what led us into this crazy decision we're in, is that, man, that Sidney Jones pick is haunting us right now, haunting our secondary right now. The failed health of a player like, Jalen Mills, who could really take the strain off of this. God, he's going to be a big comeback if he gets back next week for Dallas. That's going to be a huge thing. Even though he's probably not going to start, he's probably not going to get that many snaps, even if he comes back against Dallas. It's depth that we desperately need. That's pain. It's hurting us. Then you go to the defensive line. Yeah, we've definitely tried to address things in free agency. Tim Jernigan, right? Malik Jackson. Like we've invested on that D line, especially D tackles. But then when you look through the draft, outside of Derek Barnett, I mean, the next guys you have is an Alex McAllister that same year that didn't pan out. It was a wasted draft pick. Elijah Qualls, who I thought had potential, but it just didn't work out in 2017. 2018, we went with Josh Sweat, which we're still trying to develop, and let's hope that turns into something, because we do need that third pass rusher. We need to develop someone to do that job. Into this past year with Sharif Miller. The draft capital, you know what I'm saying? Like Brandon Graham's not going to be here forever, and I love Brandon Graham. But we're coming on the backside of his career. We've got to find answers there. And that's what I'm really getting at, is a lot of the struggles that we're experiencing have a lot to do with injury, failed potential, and maybe an undervaluation of positions with draft capital. And that's what I'm going to leave it off at. That's my thoughts on it. Now I'm going to spin it back on you guys. You guys tell me, what do you think about this conversation? This is a huge conversation. I get it. But tell me, what do you guys think about draft capital, the ballsy and the moxie of the way that we approach the draft? Because believe me, we're aggressive in the draft. We really are. It doesn't always pan out. What do you guys think about, development, player development, personnel decisions, and free agency, and the draft, all those type of things? Give me your thoughts, guys. All right, y'all. This is Steve Hyder, Gate City Sports Channel. I'm jumping off here because this video is really long. Sorry, guys. All right. You know what time it is. It's time for me to ask you to like, comment, and subscribe. And it's time for us to go EAGLES. Let's go, Eagles.